So today we're going to crack open a kind of scientific cold case, all the way from 1969. It's a story that gets at a really fundamental question. How do we choose? The clues aren't in some dusty old mansion, though. They're inside a psychology paper that came up with a radical new way of thinking about every single decision we make. And it all comes down to how we spend our time.
Just think about your day so far. Right now, you chose to be here, listening to this. But you could have been answering emails, or, let's be honest, scrolling through social media, or maybe making a coffee. Every single moment is a crossroads, right? And this simple, constant act of choosing is actually one of the biggest mysteries in behavioral science. So, to solve a mystery this big, where do you even start? Well, scientists didn't begin with the super complex human brain. Nope. They started somewhere much, much simpler. But it turns out just as revealing. They started with pigeons. Yeah, pigeons. I know it sounds a little strange, but stick with me here, because by studying their choices, we can start to uncover the basic laws that might just govern our own.
All right, so here's where our story really kicks off. The goal? To find a simple, predictable, maybe even a mathematical rule for how animals choose between different options. Basically, a law of behavior. So back in 1961, a psychologist named Richard Herrnstein discovered something pretty remarkable. He called it the matching law. Here's the gist. He found that if a pigeon had, say, 2 keys it could peck for food, it would spread out its pecks to perfectly match how often each pea paid out a reward. But here's the really crucial part, the detail that sets up our whole story. He was measuring behavior by counting things. You know, these little separate actions, the number of pecks. And the idea was it was so simple and elegant, you know? Let's say key A paid out food 3 times more often than key B. Well, guess what? The pigeons would peck key A about 3 times as often. It's that direct. And if the rewards were totally equal, yep, the pecks were equal too. It was like they were these perfect little accountants, meticulously matching their work to their paycheck. Okay, but this is where it gets interesting. This whole thing led to a bit of a puzzle. You could even call it a paradox. Were scientists, by focusing so much on counting these tiny little instantaneous pecks, were they maybe missing the bigger picture? Like, what is behavior really? And that is the exact question that 2 other scientists, Baum and Rachlin, asked in their big 1969 paper. They came up with this really revolutionary idea. They said, hey, what if we just stop thinking of behavior as a series of separate dots? Peck, peck, peck. What if we start seeing it as a continuous, flowing line? And here's the kicker. What if the real currency of choice isn't the number of things you do, but the actual flow of time itself? So now you've got these 2 big ideas, right? And they're competing. On one hand, you have the old way. Behavior is just a collection of separate, countable things, like pecks. But on the other hand, this new idea says, no. Behavior is this ongoing activity, and the most important thing isn't how many times you do something, but how much time you spend doing it. Okay, so how do you test an idea like that? Well, they couldn't just use the old key pecking setup. That wouldn't work. They needed a totally new kind of experiment, something designed from the ground up to measure one thing and one thing only: time, not counts. And their solution was, honestly, just brilliant. They built this chamber where the floor was split right down the middle, balanced on a pivot, kind of like a seesaw. The genius of it was, the experiment didn't care what the pigeon was doing, pecking, walking around, whatever. It only cared about one thing: where the pigeon was standing and for how long. It was a machine built for one purpose: to measure time allocation. Okay, so here's how it worked. Super clever. The pigeon could stand on the left side, let's say it had a red light, and that side would randomly deliver a food reward. Or it could stand on the right side with a green light, which also delivered food on its own random schedule. But here's the key innovation, the part that changes everything. The moment the pigeon steps on one side, its weight makes the floor pivot just a tiny bit, and a timer for that side starts ticking. For the first time, they were really measuring the duration of a choice. All right, so the stage is set, the timers are running, and everything comes down to this one central question. Will the pigeon's allocation of time match the rewards they're getting, just like their pecks did? The answer to this could literally change how we think about choice itself. Okay, let's look at the actual data. This is for just one bird. So each little dot on here represents a different setup, a different condition.
The bottom axis, the horizontal one, shows the ratio of food rewards, how much more food they got on one side versus the other. And the side axis, the vertical one, shows the ratio of time they spent on each side. And even with all the randomness you'd expect from a single animal, you can already start to see it, right? A clear pattern is forming right along that diagonal line.
And now, for the big reveal. This is the moment when they took the data from all the pigeons and averaged it all together. Well, all that noise just disappears, and the signal that's left behind is crystal clear. Just look at that. It is an almost perfect straight line. The ratio of time they spent on each side was a near-perfect match for the ratio of food they got from each side. Boom! The hypothesis was totally confirmed.
So the big takeaway here, the really crucial point, is this. The matching law wasn't just about counting little actions like pecks. It was about something so much more fundamental. It was about how living things invest their time. And this gave us a new, way more powerful version of the matching law. It's not about pecks, it's not about pressing levers, it's about the one single resource that all behavior, everything we do, consumes: time. Choice isn't just a series of actions. Choice is time allocation. That's the game changer.
Okay, so pigeons in a box, that's fascinating. But how does this apply to us, to people? Well, this discovery gives us an incredibly powerful way to understand the choices we all make every single day. The ultimate takeaway from this paper is, honestly, it's pretty profound. Think about it. Every single decision you make, from something tiny like hitting the snooze button to something huge like choosing a career, it's all fundamentally a decision about how to allocate your time. And time, well, that's the one resource you can never, ever get more of. The paper boils this whole principle down with a really powerful idea, and they introduce a new word here: value. Because it turns out we don't just match our time to the raw rewards, we match our time to what we perceive as the value of an activity. So what makes up this value? What goes into that calculation? Well, it's basically a mental calculation based on 3 key things. And think about this for a second, it'll make so much sense. Why is it so easy to scroll social media instead of, say, starting that big project you've been putting off? Well, social media gives you a really high rate of reinforcement, right? A new post, a like, a funny video every few seconds. That big project, it promises a huge amount of reinforcement, that feeling of accomplishment, but its immediacy is super low. The payoff might be weeks or months away, so our brains are just naturally drawn to that quicker, more frequent payoff, even when we know it's smaller. And look, this isn't some calculation you're doing on a spreadsheet. It's happening all the time, subconsciously. It's like a nonstop auction for your next minute. The immediate buzz of your phone, that's one bid. The quiet satisfaction of reading a book, that's another bid. The quick pleasure of a snack is bidding against the long-term goal of getting in shape. And your brain is the auctioneer, constantly weighing these values to decide what you do right now. And that leaves us with one final, really crucial question. If your life is basically a time economy, and every choice you make is an investment based on this deep, intuitive calculation of value, are you happy with your portfolio? Are you investing your minutes in the things that you truly value? And that, well, that's the mystery that this incredible paper from over 50 years ago leaves for each of us to solve for ourselves.